Hi, Karen.
Hi, Christina.
Welcome back
Yeah,
to
I'm so
our.
excited to talk about this topic now. One of the ones I've been struggling with early on. So, why don't you go ahead and introduce the topic that we're talking about today?
So, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to our YouTube, Simply Human, and we're really glad that you're here again. Today, we're going to be doing a continued deep dive into the topic of imposter syndrome. And if you haven't seen our first video, we're going to put it in the link below, and we encourage you to check that out. And today, we're going to be following up on one of the core strategies that we brought up in that episode, which is about avoiding the external validation trap and cultivating genuine identity as part of that process. So today we want to go into much deeper detail in order to give you some practices that you can do, and also just to help flesh out understanding of what we mean by avoiding the external validation trap, how to identify and cultivate your own values, and how to tune into that as part of figuring out how to show up in the world authentically. So, Karen, one of the things when you and I had a conversation when we were talking about doing this podcast, we were talking about values and how we can use our values to help guide us in making our choices. And you had mentioned that he's like, well, there was a time I don't think I knew what my values were. Right? Can you
Yeah,
speak a little bit about that?
I would love to because I think it's very interesting, and I always wonder about the imposter syndrome, the tie to values. I think it makes sense, a lot of sense now. The tie to it, right? And my struggle with decision making makes a lot of sense because I never could hang my hat on a decision, and I realized it's because I was missing my fullness of or the values, right? The values that really made me make a decision and gave me something. I wasn't kind of going with whatever was on topic or whatever, or how I felt. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So let me just go back for a second, because like values took me a long time to really get a hold of, because I realized when I look back now, my values, initially I grabbed onto my parents' values. And then I grabbed on to different values of where I was. Like, I felt like there's some values, not just company values, but then there was values related to being a Christian. There's values related to this and that. And I realized how much, when I was asked the value question, my own values, my own personal values, I couldn't answer. I
Mm.
felt like they were changing based on who I was talking to, right? Because I want to fit in, like we were talking about earlier in the first video, our podcast that we had about belonging, right? And so it was depending on who I was, and I didn't know about what my core values are. And no wonder that it was hard for me to make decisions, because I couldn't decide, well, how can I hold true to a decision, because I wasn't so sure like what to decide, because you could go either way with the decision, right? And so it was very interesting where when I began to really saturate with my values and where we're going to be sharing with people the importance of having and knowing your own true values, right? Because that's part of your core being, right? And I think that's the most important, exciting part of what I'm so excited about to share today.
It's there are a couple of things you said that struck me. One, you said you realized it was hard to hang your hat on a decision because you didn't entirely know where it was coming from. And it made me think about how, we talk about imposter syndrome, that one of the main emotions around imposter syndrome is anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
right? The fear that I'm going to be found out, or the fear I'm going to make a mistake, the fear that they're going to discover I'm a fraud because I don't really know this thing I'm doing. And when you think about it, like, in our life, we're making decisions all the time. So what you're saying, oh, I couldn't hang my hat on that decision. That kind of makes sense, if that would feed into that uncertainty and anxiety, right?
Exactly,
Oh my
exactly.
gosh, yeah.
And I think that's the point of it. I mean, I think what's interesting is the values are developed over time, right? And you feel a sense towards these certain values. It's not like, because there's those that you think you should have, instead of it being the values that are core to who you are, right? I think when I started to understand this work with authenticity and being who I really was, and we'll be getting into this a little about the, not feeling one with my values. And
Mhm,
that was
mhm.
the reason why, because I wasn't becoming who I truly, truly was inside, that I knew. So I'm just so excited about this topic. So cool.
Well, let me ask you a question on something else you said that just sparked a question in me. So you said, growing up, maybe you got some values handed down to you from your parents, from your faith. I mean, is it your opinion too that that's probably what most people, like most of us, probably initially are given values and maybe have not stopped to think about that, like, wow, do those values that I was given, does it really align with the person that I'm becoming over my life? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the values when we talked a little bit about respecting elders was a big one that I had
Mm.
in a Chinese household, right? And I remember really hurt me in the end when I was doing consulting work. I think I mentioned to you in one of the sessions we had where respecting elders doesn't mean, and to me, I interpret it as like listening to the elders, like whatever they say, they know better. So don't even share your opinion because
Mm.
what I mean? So, and I live by that, right? And I didn't realize how much in consulting, especially, I was living that out subconsciously or whatever. And then it ended up hurting me because as a consultant, you're supposed to provide your wisdom. Because you're from an outside point of view and or letting other consultants share who had been experiences consultants before, but I had great things to contribute, so I downplayed my own voice, which is I learned early, I believe, because of that cultural thing. I'm not saying, and then I learned that it's not, you can still respect your elders and still provide your perspective. But I didn't know how to do it or what it really meant. And so I think that's what I kind of mean. Until I found the meaning for it, I was reframed what it meant for me, and that allowed me to not have so much dissonance in my body or
Mm.
ability to feel that like, oh, here we go again, and never feeling I was good enough or I was wrong or whatever. So it really fed into my posture syndrome when I think about it.
Yeah, I think this is why so we don't know what order people are watching these videos, but this is the one we're doing right after the introduction. And I think because it is such an important piece
Definitely.
of going from just coping with imposter syndrome with various external validation strategies to really transforming, healing, thriving. And we want to just recap a little bit about what we mean by the external validation trap in case you didn't see the other video. That there are a lot of sort of self-help out there that's providing tips and strategies for dealing with imposter syndrome. And I noticed in reviewing them that there was a really heavy emphasis on the strategies around external validation. So it could be keeping a file of all the nice things anybody ever said about you. And then when you're having doubt or dealing with your imposter, you go and look in that file, or you Google yourself, or you go call your best friend and say, am I okay? Am I good enough? And you get that external validation. But the problem with it is it's dependent on praise, external praise and recognition and external factors. And by the way, Karen, I don't know if I've shared this story with you, but that was a big one for me that
Mhm,
started my journey. Was I had always been a top student, smart, and a lot of my sense of self came from being smart. And it aligned with the values in my family, which
mhm.
was you were supposed to be, an A student and think and use critical thinking and be smart. And then I got this job where being smart was not valued in the same way because
Interesting.
I was seen as a boat rocker.
Oh,
Yeah, what was valued in this
wow.
organization
Now that's
was
interesting.
you like draw within the lines, you don't question anything, don't bring in character. You just do what you're told. And I had been raised with the value of from my parents, which I would say I probably still hold. It still actually fits me. Of don't just do something because someone told you to do it. Don't. I have the opposite from you. I was taught don't just do something because someone's in authority. My dad's a little bit of a rebel, so his value was question
Yeah.
everything, question everyone.
Wow.
Don't assume that they
Wow.
know more than you. You probably know more than them. So when I was in an organization where that was bad behavior, I had never experienced that before. I was so disoriented. I didn't know how to think about myself. Actually, was one of the first people laid off when they had layoffs, because who wants a boat rocker? And I felt so confused at that time, because this value that had served me. What I learned is, if I was relying on only external, then what would I've dropped that and then taken on just do what I'm told, don't question anything, do the thing even if it doesn't make any sense. Like, the company wasn't run well. It actually ended up like just crashing and burning. And I was one of the people going, "Hey, we've got some problems." And I was like, "Shh, don't say that." And right, so I think it's so important that we have to figure out. You can figure out your own values, and then you can decide, does this environment support me, or is this environment, it's going to be a clash, because you're never going to get that external validation you're seeking, if that's what you need to feel you're okay, unless you surrender those values.
Yeah, and I think it's
Right.
that whole point of being able to make a conscious decision about that, and that you'll be
Yeah.
okay either way. Because I think that's why I love about values now, because it makes me decide on, like, so I just started I'm doing my own business now. Do I want to go back to corporate, or do I want to stay in my own business? And it comes down to is my value system has to guide that decision.
Yeah.
Either one's a good decision, but it comes down to what makes it the right decision for me personally, because I finally realized the importance of you not going to work always stressed.
Hmm.
People love going to work and they aren't stressed because their organization, they like the organization, they feel like they're making a difference. And then there's others who have to have their own company to do it. And that's the whole point of, we don't have to be always in this pain of like anxiety or stress. It's a choice. But I always love what you and I are doing in this, about with especially imposter syndrome. We're doing in other ones too, is teaching people how to be simply human with these techniques so that you can really enjoy life. Being simply human is, we're not made for always being in stress and anxiety. Like, we can do things that allow us to be living a full life that feels good inside. And even the
Yeah.
challenges are still feel like they're the right, you still have some stress, right? I'm not saying you don't have any stress, because we all have stress, but it's how you deal with it so that it doesn't, I always like to use, it doesn't grip you, right? Or paralyze you. That's what I get worried about all the time. That I used to have all the time, being paralyzed by it, which I don't have anymore. So
Well, I think also, when you know that you have your own values, like in my situation, even though I was getting the opposite of external validation, right? I was getting external condemnation.
yeah, exactly.
there was I was able to anchor into something in myself that knew, like, what I was doing. Ultimately it showed, over time. I left the company, but then my colleagues kept calling me and kept me up to date what was happening. But I knew that this is, I think, where I learned that there's a difference between, you being wrong, like me being wrong,
Mhm.
and then the situation being wrong for
For
me,
you, exactly, right,
right? That's
right.
completely different. And you can't make that distinction if you don't know what your own value system is. You just can't. With this external validation, you adopt what's external to you, and then you try to, shoehorn yourself into living up into that. And then you have a different kind of stress. That's the masking stress, that's sort of imposter syndrome adjacent, that we've talked about. And while the external validation strategies that we've seen might provide short-term relief, you mentioned in our first video that it would temporarily work for you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
you
it
would
could. I mean, some
try.
of these coping are very powerful. They worked until my imposter syndrome questions and my, my inner critic said that's not going to work. And there were some that worked, but I could never hold on to it. It generated some success, but it didn't generate lasting success. And I think it's because we learn more and more that the gifts, right, of what we're trying to give is more from an internal perspective, right? It's like finding it, because you have everything. When I finally heard that thing, you have everything within yourself that you need, which means you don't need external validation. You just got to learn how to uncap that within you. And the
Mhm.
values is one key element of uncapping that ability, right? To be, living more in the present moment and joy and da 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 in life,
Yeah.
from my perspective.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I actually love about the Gen Z generation is that they are much more tuned in already to checking in with themselves
Mm.
and honoring that. And I have to say, like, Gen Z, generally, their parents are my generation, like Gen X, they're generally the children of Gen Xers. And so my hope is partly that that's come from something that we've brought to the table. It's just really, it is different because I would say that my generation, Gen X, boomers, I don't think that we were given the tools and the awareness about how important it is to turn inwards. There, especially you think about just time wise in the 80s and the 90s, 2000, so much was about like the material trappings of success. Did you have the car? Did you have the job?
Yeah.
Were
My
you
mom
working
always
the
was
six
about Dress
months?
for Success, the book, Dress for Success. I
Oh
swear
yeah,
I need cover to
yeah,
cover.
and like where you work. I think Brene Brown talks about this exhaustion as a status symbol.
Hmm. Hmm.
So people would send emails at 10 o'clock at night just to look like I'm working 12 hours. And so I think there's definitely the Gen X and baby boomers. I don't think we'd had the tools to really consistently know how to do this internal reflection. And I do admire, I think millennials started with it and Gen Z really see it strong, which is why I do have so much hope for society or the younger generations. And this ability to look inward, like what are we talking about, when we're talking about our values, that we start when we're younger with getting values taught to us by our parents, our teachers, church, wherever you're Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you're passed on values. But as you grow, as you live your life, there is a need to discern like what represents you, and how do we do that. And what Karen and I have come to discover on our journeys is that it's something you feel inside. It's not something that you may come across it external to you, but you'll feel the resonance inside your own body. So it starts with feelings. So there's sometimes it starts with you hear something, like somebody is talking about their own values, and maybe it's my purpose is to like help others. The first thing is not typically, oh, I think that too. The first thing that happens is we feel something. Like for me, it's somewhere here, my torso, like a hit, like a, oh yeah, like I get that. The very first thing is an aha in my body. Like, do you have that similar thing?
Yeah, I think that's the thing where it's almost like it's not the emotion. I think that's the thing that was interesting for me. So I had a hard time with feeling it in my body. I don't know why. I think I was always emotionally driven or something where I could always, my emotions were what the word is, like was driven by emotion. People would call me emotional. But in actuality, when I started to slow down and start to take it, I could feel it in the heart. Like I could feel it when someone said something that resonated. There was something, there was like I can feel it now, like warmth or
Mhm.
something. Or like when someone says something I really love, I can, like, it's almost like I can feel my breath, like, oh cool, that type of thing. And when someone says something that I don't agree with, I can feel it too now, right? I
Right.
feel the tension in my shoulders, or that I don't agree with them. And so I can read my body signals more than I could before. And it's even like sometimes when people say, how sometimes, well, this is what people say. So sometimes someone says something and I'll be shaking my head no without even knowing I'm shaking my head no. Right? It's like, because my body's working. So it's just very interesting. So,
No, that's two things you said. One, that's when we're doing this process of discovering what our values are, sometimes we know what it's not
mhm.
before we can clearly articulate what it is. And it's because you have that dissonant, like, ugh, like, ouch. That's not, I didn't, you said you identify with your emotions. I wasn't real connected to my body because I was more identified with my thoughts, with my thinking. And again, we've talked about how important it is if you're going to go on this journey that you have the support of a therapist or a coach, sort of a counselor. My therapist saw this about me early on, And she would always ask me, well, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you feel that in your body? And initially I'd be like, my what? Like, what are you talking
Yeah,
about? And I had
exactly,
no
exactly.
idea.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
we
so
were trained
she
that
would
in
have
our generation. I don't think we were trained that. Unlike,
to.
a lot of people in our generation have learned the ability to do that, and we teach our children and other people
Yeah.
that we know, which is your gen, the other generations, to really start to notice that, right? Or we notice it within them. We can see it, right? Or we can even feel their energy or dissonance, which is really odd. Like I never like took the chance to feel Michelle's energy. Michelle's my daughter. She's the 28-year-old PhD student. I never took the time to like take the time to see her reaction, and I could feel the energy now because I'm more open to energy, right? Or I'm more open to looking for her body language. I never was before when she was.
Mhm.
That was very interesting for me.
Actually, yeah, for me too, as a therapist, I've really learned to pay more attention to body language, and also with I refer to myself as Asperger's. I know that the more current term is autistic spectrum disorder, but I identify as an Aspie. And one of the things that's hard for us is facial expression. We don't make great eye contact, and no one ever explained why. And what I've come to understand is I found this great YouTube channel with a body analyst, like facial expression and body analysis are expertise. And I started realizing the connection is like, oh my gosh, it's not that I don't see it. It's like I oversee it. Like my brain is
Oh, interesting.
hypersensitive to
Interesting.
facial expression and body language. And what I was picking up all the time was dissonance,
That's
the really
interesting.
primitive microfacial expressions. So then my brain was like, wait, the words are saying this, but my brain is picking up that they're feeling, thinking something else. It's overstimulating. So I have to look away because otherwise there's so much agitation in my own body. So now I'm actually working on training myself to look at it better. And just if anybody's interested in this, and I'll put the book link. The author is Chase Hughes, and he has a book called The 6-Minute X-Ray. And he gave this really beautiful explanation that sort of applies to this imposter syndrome, because he said, just as human beings, all people mask. So he has 4 laws. All people mask, all people pretend that they're not masking. We're all wounded. We all have some sort of wounding, and we're all products of our childhood experience. With that perspective and understanding, okay, in some ways, masking is a survival strategy, which we talked about in our first episode.
Mhm.
And it's not just everybody's out there being deceptive, but everybody's out there trying to be safe. And so it's helped me have a lot more compassion, but I'm definitely more tuned into body language. So what we want to do, so part of what we're going to do is Karen's going to lead us in a little exercise. If you're like we were a while back and maybe haven't yet developed the practice of tuning into your body, it's something you actually have to develop a practice around. Like for me, I had a therapist who asked me every week, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you feel that in your body? But if you don't have that, it's helpful to have a little exercise you could do every day to start training you to tune into those sensations. So Karen, you want to tell us about this exercise?
Yeah, I think what's great is I've learned it on an exercise, and it's off of meditation, an exercise in meditation, right? But I could never do meditation because it took so long, and my inner voice kept going. So one of the exercises is, if you guys will bear with me for a second, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to just breathe in, right, and breathe out. Could sit comfortably in your chair. Breathe in, breathe out, and take another deep in and another deep out. And then what you're going to do is take your thumb and your third finger, and you're going to rub it against each other. And you're going to start to feel that sensation. Do you feel the heat? And you're going to press harder between the thumb and the third finger until so you can start to feel the ridges. And you're going to feel the heat. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take the one hand and I want you to put it against the other hand, and I want you to slide it up and down so you can feel all the fingernails. You can start to feel the palm. And I want you to just start to, again, do you feel the coolness? And then the heat as your hand comes back together and the coolness and the heat.
Hmm.
And then as you feel that heat, now I want you to just move one hand down to your stomach while you breathe and out and in and out. And check into your shoulders and how do your shoulders feel? And check into that breath, how your stomach is rising up and down and up and down. And then just come back when you're ready to come back. And the part of this I do, and I did this with, a corporate leadership team. I've done this with my clients one-on-one. The importance of this is primarily because it allows you to experience that your body can tell you a lot of different things if you just give it some quietness and just become more aware. And that's the whole point. Have you done it before where you also went to a meditation where they say, start with your feet and you scrunch up your feet and then you let it go. And you scrunch up your thighs and then you let it go, or your calves. I always do this wrong because I never know the parts of my body like Christina does. But the whole point of it is that's how you get to know your body and how you feel. And then once you start to experience that, you'll know more. And so that's what I think is so cool, because you'll start to feel it more because you've had that practice in it. And it does take some practice, but it isn't that long of practice. Like, you can't say, oh, forget it, don't do it, because you can't. But as you do with a therapist or a coach, or even on YouTube, you can find some things. I know that I took a course called Positive Intelligence, which I also actually have an offering on positive intelligence, mental fitness. And we do these type of exercises that take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 12 minutes. It's really powerful when you learn these small techniques, or it's even just going outside and being able to just feel when you exercise, and you just do the shrugging of the shoulders, and you just do some free dancing, allows you to even feel it as well. So it's very exciting. I think that is what's really, really cool. So I'm excited to hear more about what you're going to talk about after talking about this, about body and
Well, I was wondering, Karen, like for you, so the point that we're saying is that when you're starting to think about your values, what are the ones that you were given that are still pretty much aligned with who you
who
feel
you.
that you've become as an adult? And then which ones actually don't feel like they fit anymore for you? And they were given to you, they're handed down. Some things are going to fit, some things you keep that you get handed down to you, some things you don't. So it's okay to do a reassessment of that.
Yeah, I
But
think as you grow, you always have changes of values, right? Until I think I adapted until I finally was able to do more of the work, like we talked about the journey, the stuff to know yourself better, because you start to shed them as you get to know yourself better, because you're not using what people are saying that you should be, you should be, you should be. Because I used to live my life with should be's, the expectations, right? To where I know that is core to what I care about. And then I'm much happier in what I'm doing in life because it's the core. So I make my decisions based on now and jobs and other things based on my values, where I want to be.
the thing is that you could have been like, for me, when I give the example of my dad instilled the value of question everything,
Yeah.
you know, you use your own mind to figure things out. Like that one, that serves me, that aligns with my own beliefs and my own life experience.
Yeah.
But there may be values that you were given when you were younger, and maybe that isn't working for you, and that's not fitting the person you've become and is confining. If it aligns with you, you're going to feel it in your body, and it'll be a warm, sort of like a familiar feeling. And if it doesn't align for you anymore, it's going to feel heavy. It might feel more constricting. It may cause your shoulders to roll in. It may cause you to numb. You may numb out because you've gotten used to carrying this value and just going through the motions of it, but you don't have any heart in it anymore. You really do have to go and do an inventory of everything that has come up to this point in your life, that the experiences that you've had that you feel has given you wisdom, and try to explore what is a theme that I feel really deeply inside is meaningful to me. So when we talk about values, we're talking about, what do you hold dear? What is dear to you? What is something that when you're weighing against something else, it's the thing that has the weight to it. And again, it's great if what you first are figuring out is what doesn't fit for you. That's fine. And so what we're going to recommend that you do is do a little exercise. So a couple of exercises. So first, it's learning to get into your body, trying to identify, where do you feel your gut feeling? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your heart? Maybe you feel it behind you. Maybe the values that resonate you feel in your gut, and the values that don't work for you anymore, you actually feel in your back area, because it's like a weight that you're carrying that isn't yours. So it could be a different place. So try connecting the feeling and the motion of it to someplace in your body. You can just put a plus next to it and a negative next to it to start sorting out what was given to you, what you've learned. And initially, just see if you can write a list. It's fine. Go online if you're not even sure what words are
Yeah,
valued.
there's value lists like out there. Like,
Yeah. But like Karen and I had to talk about integrity, and we had different definitions for integrity.
yeah. I
And
struggled a lot with that word because I was never felt like I was honest with. I'd always say integrity because I felt like I had to be say that had integrity, and this is what she's talking about. So I always felt like, I said integrity because I wanted to be have integrity, and then my definition of integrity was very hard to achieve, and so as a result, I never felt good. I had such dissonance with it. Instead of integrity, when she gave her definition, it was a lot easier. So what was your definition again? Was to be
so Karen's definition was, oh, you have to tell the truth all the time.
no white lie.
Okay, so that's probably not going to work, because if you're also a kind person, there may be times when that's not the appropriate choice. It's like an unnecessary harshness. What would be kind for that person? So yeah, it's unachievable. For me, what I told her, I said, well, for me, it comes from a Latin word that really means to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about being integrated. And that way, say it's a situation where the truth might hurt someone, but you have this value around being kind, being thoughtful, being intentional with your words. You've been in total integrity to find really the sort of skillful way through that
To
moment.
help them. That's the
Yeah,
integral part.
the
It's
whole
your
goal.
intent.
Yeah.
And so when she said that, I'm like, oh, I think I have integrity,
Yeah,
right?
so I was like, Karen, you have integrity. I've known
I was
you for
almost
a
wanting to
long
like go like this. Oh my God, don't bring up integrity on this podcast. Oh my God.
time. But I think it's a really good
Example.
because there was something given somewhere along the way, you were told that's what that means.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I mean, Christina, I do one of my consulting offerings is about trigger words or internal
Mhm.
triggers, and that I didn't realize, but that word integrity always was an internal trigger for me. I held it so strongly, that definition, and I never took the time to ask people what their definitions were, or
Yeah.
things like that. And then it's like, again, reframing. We're constantly reframing. I think that's the gift of life. You're constantly reframing and learning and
Yeah,
about
and
your
so
so even the word values. I had a hard time. I told you guys earlier. Don't get overwhelmed by this, okay, guys? Because trust me, you'll start to unfold for you, just like it unfolded for us at different times. Like Christina's value journey was a lot unfolded for her earlier. Mine was later in life. And so I think that's the whole point of this journey too, right, Christina?
yeah, it takes time. Wherever you're at is where you're at. This is just an invitation to be curious and start thinking about creating this foundation for authentic and genuine identity based on your values, driving your actions, so that we can start having something really solid rather than just external validation. And so the next part that you do after you sort of have a list, look for that resonant feeling, look for no reaction, probably isn't one that's strong for you, and look for adverse reaction, because that's going to be like gauging for you, and it'll
Yeah.
be a really helpful, a really rich exercise to do. And then the next thing that we wanted to just share with you, then what do I do once I have these values? How does that help me with imposter syndrome? Well, this kind of comes back to the beginning when Karen was talking about when I make my decisions or what I did, I couldn't hang my hat on it, because could shift depending on the environment when you're not coming from your own internal set of your own integrity, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I want to say this too, and I started to regret. I'm always regretting my decision
Mhm.
because it wasn't based on a value. So it always, so it's interesting. I had
Or
lots.
if something wasn't, or was going against her. If you
Yeah,
had regret, it might
exactly.
have been
Very
going
much
against.
exactly, exactly.
There's a model that comes from, it's called ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. And what you would do is you would take a piece of paper and you're going to draw sort of a big giant letter Y on it. Okay. And in the middle is a choice point, and at the bottom is the situation. So some situation happens, it leads to a choice point, and in that choice point, there is a moment where you're going to feel the uncertainty. You might feel the anxiety. You might feel the fear that comes up. There's going to be discomfort. What most people and a lot of people do, and even where imposter syndrome comes in, is they will go to away moves. So it's away from the discomfort. What can I do to get away from the
I
discomfort?
have to go like
Yeah,
this.
so I'm gonna, well, what are they doing? Like, what will be acceptable? So I'll say what I know is gonna make them happy, and then I won't feel my fear of rejection or my fear of I'm gonna be thrown out of the cave. And I might dissociate. I might avoid. There's a whole bunch of things that we do to avoid that discomfort. And how you use your values is to instead to feel that, go ahead, feel that discomfort and then reorient to those values. What's meaningful, what you know that when you wake up in the morning, even if it was hard in that moment, you're gonna feel better and be able to look at yourself in the mirror because you stayed in integrity with yourself. You stayed in integrity with, this is what's important to me. This is who I am. This is what's authentic. Like, I have to show up as myself. So you could use this model, like every time you have a difficult problem you're thinking about, you can draw out the why, you can put the situation, the choice point, you can put down all the things that you might want to do to get out of the discomfort real quick. On the other side, write down what values could support you in sitting with that discomfort, but taking the action that's going to lead you towards ultimately feeling better about your choice, better about yourself, and more authentic. So, what I'm going to put a link down below that will connect you to additional resources on this choice. There's a great little video out there from the Happiness Trap on the choice point, and we'll
With
put
Russ
it. I'll put
Harris,
it.
right? With Russ Harris.
Yeah, and I'm going to see if there's a way I could put a link
Yeah,
to this
definitely.
model, this little
Love
handout
it.
for
Love him.
people. And this is what we encourage. This is the place to start doing the values work. And then how do you actually start using the values very intentionally? Okay. And then besides these tools that Karen Kate gave you of being more aware and sensing your body, starting to get a sense of what your values are, and starting to bring intention to thinking about those choice point moments when you're feeling that fear and anxiety and intentionally choosing to go to your values. What we encourage you to do is this work is much easier if you do it with a therapist, with a coach, with a pastoral counselor, with somebody that you trust that can really help you on this journey. So, is there anything else that you wanted to add as we wrap this up? Don't forget, there's going to be more videos like this. We're going to go into some other aspects of working with the imposter syndrome and having alternatives to external validation, including cultivating humility, cultivating genuine curiosity, and techniques for bringing curiosity into action, which I teach a lot of my clients, and really excited to bring that to you. So make sure to hit subscribe and like and hit the next video that comes up. And please share this. If you have friends or family or people you care about who are struggling with imposter syndrome, please share this with them. And then put in the comments below anything else, like questions that you have, so that we can make sure to try to answer it in future videos. And we want to try to build a community here of other human beings who are looking to live their best life, and even just being simply human. So we're really looking forward to seeing you in the future. And Karen, you doing okay right now?
I'm just so excited about this journey that we're going to go on together and sharing each other the wisdom that we have. And I'm looking forward to even the comments of wisdom that you guys might have gained from this, from ours, as well as from other wisdom as well. So
Okay.
until next time, right?
Yep. We'll see you all later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.